Television in the 1970s was a minefield. One week you were America's next obsession. The next you were tossed in the trash without so much as a goodbye. Some shows didn't just fade, they were yanked out of existence, leaving fans confused, angry, and desperate for closure. So, why did networks kill them off so brutally? And which of your favorites got cut down mid-stride? Buckle up, because some of these cancellations still sting hard. Kolchak, The Night Stalker, 1974 to 1975. Imagine a show that gave us vampires, werewolves, swamp creatures, and demons, all hunted down by a rumpled, wisecracking reporter who never stopped digging where he didn't belong. That was Kolchak, The Night Stalker. Darren McGavin played Carl Kolchak, a Chicago journalist with a knack for stumbling into the supernatural. He carried his tape recorder, a camera, and a mouthful of smart remarks into places most people would run screaming from. It had everything: moody nighttime locations, eerie creature of the week plots, and the biting satire of a man who fought both monsters and newsroom bureaucracy. Critics saw potential. Fans fell hard for its mix of horror and noir. And if you've ever seen The X-Files, you can thank Kolchak. Chris Carter has admitted it was his blueprint. So, why kill a show with such promise? Network politics and bad scheduling. ABC never really knew what to do with it. Production was rushed, scripts were uneven, and budgets ran dry faster than Kolchak could reload his flashbulbs. Instead of fixing it, ABC pulled the plug after just 20 episodes. No finale, no farewell, no closure. Carl Kolchak didn't get to conquer the supernatural. He didn't even get to finish his last investigation. One week he was facing down a monster. The next, he vanished from the schedule like he never existed. Fans were left furious. McGavin himself said he loved the character, but hated how the network handled it. What's the kicker? The show only grew bigger after death. Its cult following turned into legend, with reruns inspiring writers and filmmakers for decades. But for those who watched in 1975, it felt like being abandoned in the middle of a dark alley with something growling just out of sight. The Mary Tyler Moore Hour, 1979. Mary Tyler Moore was untouchable in the 70s. Her groundbreaking sitcom, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, dominated the decade and ended with one of the most beloved finales in television history. So, when CBS pitched her comeback, expectations were sky high. Enter the Mary Tyler Moore Hour, a bizarre hybrid of variety show and sitcom that seemed like it should have worked, but instead fell flat on its face. The format was confusing. Some nights you'd tune in and it felt like a classic sitcom, with Mary playing a version of herself. The next, it slipped into skits, musical numbers, and awkward guest appearances that made viewers wonder what show they were actually watching. Imagine expecting another sharp workplace comedy like The Mary Tyler Moore Show, but instead getting a half-musical, half-sketch mashup that felt stitched together in the editing room. CBS wanted another hit. Mary wanted to stretch creatively, but America wanted neither. Ratings tanked almost immediately. Critics were baffled, audiences tuned out, and network executives panicked. Instead of tweaking the format, CBS axed it after only 11 episodes. Just like that, one of television's biggest names was left standing on an empty stage. The cancellation was brutal, not just because of the speed, but because of the shock. This was Mary Tyler Moore, queen of 1970s television, America's sweetheart of modern comedy. If her new project could be tossed in the trash without ceremony, what chance did lesser-known shows have? Today, the Mary Tyler Moore Hour is more of a trivia question than a memory. Most people don't even know it existed. For those who tuned in back in 1979, it was the equivalent of watching a superstar strike out in front of a stadium full of fans, and the network cutting the lights before anyone had a chance to clap. Holmes and Yo-Yo, 1976 to 1977. Now, picture this. A straight-laced detective paired with a partner who just happens to be a robot. That was Holmes and Yo-Yo, one of the strangest attempts at a buddy cop show ever aired. John Schuck played Officer Yo-Yo, a humanoid robot whose chest contained a Polaroid camera, whose stomach could make printouts, and whose circuits constantly malfunctioned at the worst possible times. He was paired with grumpy Detective Holmes, played by Richard B. Schull, who spent most episodes babysitting his robotic partner. On paper, it was supposed to be slapstick fun, a goofy spin on the buddy cop formula. In practice, it was a half-baked gimmick that struggled to decide if it was parody or actual police drama. One moment, Yo-Yo would bend steel bars with robotic strength. The next, he'd freeze mid-sentence like a broken wind-up toy. The tone never quite worked. But the show's biggest problem? Timing. It aired during a period when TV audiences were craving gritty realism. Think Kojak or Starsky and Hutch. Instead, ABC dropped this bumbling RoboCop comedy that looked like it was aimed at kids. The result? Instant rejection. Critics mocked it, audiences didn't buy it, and by episode 13, the network pulled the cord without hesitation. The abrupt cancellation left its central joke unfinished. Would Yo-Yo ever be accepted as a serious cop? Would his constant malfunctions destroy Holmes's career? We never found out. Instead, the duo just disappeared from television, leaving behind little more than a reputation as one of the oddest shows of the decade. And yet, here's the irony. In an era obsessed with AI and android sidekicks, Holmes and Yo-Yo feels weirdly ahead of its time. If it aired today, it might have found an ironic cult following. Back then, it was nothing more. Then a punchline, and one the network didn't hesitate to erase overnight. The Fantastic Journey, 1977. The Bermuda Triangle had America hooked in the 70s. Rumors of disappearing ships and time warps filled bookstores and documentaries. NBC thought they had the perfect hit when they launched The Fantastic Journey, a sci-fi adventure about a group of travelers who crash into the triangle and stumble into a series of bizarre worlds. The cast included Roddy McDowall as a mysterious scientist, Ike Eisenman as a psychic teenager, and Jared Martin as the dashing leader. Each episode sent them into a new strange pocket universe. Futuristic cities, ancient civilizations, or dystopian societies that tested their survival. It was part Star Trek, part Lost in Space, but drenched in 1970s mysticism. For sci-fi fans, it was heaven. But for NBC, it was a headache. The production costs were high, the tone was uneven, and ratings never broke through. Worse, it aired opposite heavy hitters in the schedule, which crushed any chance it had to find an audience. After only 10 episodes, the network slammed the brakes. The ending was pure frustration. Viewers had invested in these stranded explorers, waiting for the moment they'd finally break free from the Bermuda Triangle. But instead of a finale, the series just stopped. No resolution, no answers, no reunion. The cast never escaped, and neither did the fans who wanted closure. The cancellation turned The Fantastic Journey into a cult relic. For those who remember it, it's not just about the cheesy special effects or the futuristic costumes. It's about the sense of unfinished business. This was a show that promised answers to one of the great mysteries of the decade, only to vanish into the same kind of void it was depicting. Hate L. Baltimore, 1975. Here's a wild one. Hate L. Baltimore, yes, spelled that way because the neon sign's E had burned out, was based on Lanford Wilson's hit stage play. The show was set inside a crumbling old hotel filled with quirky residents who didn't fit into polite society. There were retirees, oddball workers, down-on-their-luck dreamers, and characters that TV in the mid-70s usually pretended didn't exist. And that was the point. It was raw, honest, and ahead of its time. But it was also way too much for ABC's comfort zone. Audiences in 1975 weren't used to seeing marginalized characters or hearing frank conversations on network television. Sponsors panicked. Conservative viewers flooded the network with complaints. Critics couldn't decide whether it was groundbreaking or offensive. The hammer came down fast. ABC canceled it after only 13 episodes. No warning, no proper ending, just gone. Cast members later admitted they thought they were making something daring and original. Instead, they became another cautionary tale of what happens when networks try to push boundaries too far too fast. What makes Hot L Baltimore sting even more is its legacy. The original play was a Pulitzer Prize winner. On stage, it was celebrated. On TV, it was demolished before it had a chance to find an audience. Today, it's remembered as one of those rare shows that truly was ahead of its time. But in the 1970s, being ahead of your time was basically a death sentence on network TV. The Texas Wheelers, 1974. If you're wondering whether a sitcom about a struggling Texas family could ever bomb with Norman Lear's name attached, the answer is yes. The Texas Wheelers starred Jack Elam as a deadbeat dad who suddenly reappears to take care of his 4 kids after their mother's death. It was rough around the edges, darkly funny, and anything but your standard wholesome family sitcom. The cast included a young Gary Busey and even pre-Star Wars Mark Hamill. On paper, that sounds like a recipe for long-term success. But ABC buried the show in a terrible time slot against powerhouse competition. Audiences who did tune in weren't ready for the mix of gritty realism and offbeat humor. Critics didn't quite know how to categorize it. Was it comedy? Was it drama? Was it something else entirely? Within just a few episodes, the writing was on the wall. ABC yanked the series after only 4 aired episodes in 1974, and then burned off the rest the following summer with no fanfare. That's about as close to overnight cancellation as you can get. The abrupt ending left fans hanging on family storylines that were just starting to take shape. Would the Wheelers figure out how to survive together? Could their father actually redeem himself? The audience never got answers. Instead, the show slipped into obscurity. Looking back, the Texas Wheelers feels like a show that might have thrived in the 1990s era of edgy sitcoms. But in 1974, it was simply too strange, too harsh, and too misplaced. The result? Lear's rare flop, a cast that went on to bigger things, and a series that disappeared faster than you could say network shuffle. The Amazing Spider-Man, 1977 to 1979. Before Marvel ruled the box office, Spider-Man tried to sling his way into primetime television. CBS launched The Amazing Spider-Man in 1977 with Nicholas Hammond as Peter Parker. The pilot movie drew massive ratings, and a full series quickly followed. For fans, it was thrilling to finally see Spidey crawl up buildings, swing across rooftops, and take on bad guys in live action. But here's the catch. CBS treated Spider-Man like an unwanted guest. Instead of colorful villains from the comics, Peter spent most episodes fighting generic criminals, jewel thieves, corrupt businessmen, and crooked scientists. The special effects were clunky, the budget was tight, and the scripts leaned more toward detective drama than superhero adventure. Even so, kids loved it, and the ratings weren't bad. So, why cancel it? CBS executives feared being labeled the superhero network. At the time, they already had The Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman in rotation. Worried about looking childish, they axed Spidey after just 2 short seasons, despite his popularity. The ending wasn't really an ending. One week Spider-Man was webbing up villains in New York. The next he was gone with zero closure. Fans never saw Peter's story evolve, never saw villains like Green Goblin or Doc Ock, never got a satisfying goodbye. Hammond himself later said he would have loved to return if given the chance. Instead, Spider-Man's first real TV outing was buried by the very network that launched him. For comic fans in the 70s, it was like being promised a roller coaster, but getting stuck on the kiddie train and then having the ride shut down mid-loop. The Richard Pryor Show, 1977. Few entertainers were as electric in the 1970s as Richard Pryor. He was raw, fearless, and unpredictable, the kind of performer who could make you laugh and squirm at the same time. When NBC gave him his own primetime variety show in 1977, fans thought television history was about to be made, and it was, for 4 episodes. The Richard Pryor Show was unlike anything else on network TV. It blended sketches, stand-up, and musical performances, but more importantly, it gave Pryor a national platform to push boundaries. He poked fun at politics, race, relationships, and the hypocrisies of everyday life. His delivery was sharp, his characters unforgettable, and his energy unmatched. But NBC quickly got cold feet. Pryor refused to water himself down, clashing with executives who demanded safer comedy. Sponsors grew nervous. The show was too edgy for primetime America. Ratings slid, and instead of standing behind their star, NBC pulled the plug almost immediately. The cancellation left fans stunned. A legendary voice of the era, silenced by network fear. Pryor himself joked that he wasn't surprised. They wanted Richard Pryor without Richard Pryor. Today, those 4 episodes are treasured as cult TV. They're a reminder that some voices are just too big for cautious executives. The Richard Pryor show didn't fail. It scared the industry so badly that they killed it overnight. All That Glitters, 1977. Leave it to Norman Lear, the king of pushing television boundaries, to create one of the strangest forgotten shows of the 1970s. All That Glitters flipped society on its head. In this world, women ran the corporations and held power, while men stayed at home or struggled to climb the ladder. It was satire, parody, and social commentary all wrapped into a soap opera format. The idea was bold. It featured office intrigue, reverse gender roles, and endless melodrama. Lear wanted to show audiences what sexism looked like when turned upside down. But here's the problem. Viewers didn't know whether to laugh, be offended, or just change the channel. The show aired 5 nights a week in syndication, building long-running soap-style storylines. But instead of gaining momentum, it became a curiosity no one quite knew what to do with. Ratings sagged, sponsors pulled away, and after 65 episodes, the experiment ended. The cancellation came suddenly, leaving every storyline unresolved. Corporate betrayals, romantic entanglements, and identity struggles were left dangling. Fans never saw how Lear's upside-down universe was supposed to evolve. In hindsight, All That Glitters feels like a show that was too smart and too weird for its time. It asked audiences to question gender norms in 1977, a period when many weren't ready for that kind of satire. The result? It was gone faster than you could say network panic, remembered now more as a daring failure than a flop. Quark, 1977 to 1978. Long before Spaceballs spoofed science fiction, NBC tried it first with Quark. Created by Buck Henry, the man behind Get Smart, this show followed Adam Quark, a sanitation officer in space whose job was to collect intergalactic garbage. Richard Benjamin starred as Quark, leading a crew that included a half-human, half-plant science officer, a cowardly robot, and identical clone sisters who couldn't stop bickering. The idea was brilliant. Take the booming sci-fi craze of Star Wars and Star Trek and give it a comedic twist. The sets were flashy, the costumes outrageous, and the jokes endless. It was campy, colorful, and loaded with potential. But NBC had no patience. The ratings weren't spectacular, and the network didn't see the point in funding a spoof when serious sci-fi like Battlestar Galactica was on the horizon. After just 8 episodes, Quark was tossed into the cosmic trash can. The worst part? It was canceled mid-adventure. The crew's absurd missions, the ongoing gags, the potential for true cult classic glory, all cut short. Instead of becoming Star Trek's goofy cousin, it became a trivia footnote. Still, fans who caught it live remember it fondly. Quark wasn't perfect, but it was trying something different. And in a decade full of safe sitcoms, its sudden cancellation stung. In the end, the show about cleaning up space debris was treated like debris itself, dumped before it had the chance to shine. Lots of Luck, 1973 to 1974. When Dom DeLuise headlined a sitcom, NBC thought they had a guaranteed hit. Lots of Luck followed Stanley Belmont, a bachelor who worked in the lost and found department of a New York City bus company. His home life? A circus of freeloading relatives who all lived under the same roof, draining his patience and his paycheck. The setup was perfect for DeLuise's manic energy. He played Stanley as a man constantly torn between responsibility and frustration, juggling a lazy brother-in-law, a bossy mother, and a sister who couldn't stand up for herself. The comedy came from Stanley's slow march toward a nervous breakdown, delivered with DeLuise's trademark wide-eyed panic and explosive timing. But here's the thing. Audiences didn't exactly flock to watch a sitcom about misery. While critics admitted DeLuise was hilarious, the show itself never found its rhythm. It wasn't warm enough to be a family comedy, and wasn't sharp enough to be biting satire. Instead, it sat in the middle, relying on DeLuise to carry everything on his back. NBC lost patience fast. After one season, just 22 episodes, the network shut it down. No grand finale, no redemption for Stanley, no light at the end of the tunnel. One week he was holding his family together with sheer desperation. The next week, he was gone, as if none of it ever happened. What makes Lots of Luck especially tragic is how quickly it vanished from memory. With Lear-style sitcoms like Good Times and All in the Family dominating the era, Lots of Luck felt like a misfit. And NBC treated it like one too, canceling it overnight and leaving fans with nothing but rerun scraps. Today it's remembered mostly by diehards who saw the potential and wondered what could have been if the network had just given Dom DeLuise more room to breathe. The Brothers, 1972 to 1976. While most of this list is American, the UK deserves a spot for one of its most infamous overnight cancellations. The Brothers. This British drama centered on the Hammond family, owners of a successful trucking company. When the patriarch dies, his sons must take over the business, cue constant power struggles, betrayals, and boardroom battles that gave it the nickname Britain's Dallas before Dallas even existed. The series ran for 5 solid years and built a loyal following. It was gritty, smart, and ahead of its time, tackling corporate intrigue, family dysfunction, and gender politics in a way few shows dared. For many viewers in the UK, it wasn't just entertainment, it was appointment television. Then, suddenly, it was gone. Production disputes, behind-the-scenes turmoil, and declining patience from BBC executives led to the show's abrupt end. The final season, wrapped with key storylines still dangling. The Hammond brothers were still feuding, corporate battles were unfinished, and fans never got the showdown they were waiting for. The cancellation hit like a punch. Viewers who had invested years in the characters were left stranded, with no resolution and no explanation beyond a quiet BBC decision to move on. Looking back, The Brothers is remembered as both a trailblazer and a cautionary tale. It proved audiences had an appetite for serialized corporate drama, paving the way for shows like Dynasty and Dallas. But it also showed how fragile even a hit could be if the network decided to pull the plug. Overnight, Britain's most gripping family feud was silenced, leaving fans arguing about what should have happened for decades afterward. There you have it, 12 TV shows from the 1970s that vanished faster than a network executive's patience. Some were too weird, some too bold, and some just unlucky victims of terrible scheduling. But all of them prove one thing: television isn't fair. Which of these cancellations shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe for more lost stories from TV history. Because unfinished business never really dies.